Hello, everyone. We are nearing Christmas, where we celebrate the incarnation of Christ into flesh. And something that struck me at Mass today is that God has revealed himself to be an incarnational God. And there are many ways in reality in which God reveals his incarnational nature. And today I'm feeling called to speak specifically about the incarnational nature of marriage. Something that is revealed to us over and over in Scripture is that marriage to himself is God's design for the human soul. The number of times Jesus refers to himself as the bridegroom, and heaven is described as a wedding banquet. We see this imagery used over and over, and we see in the mystics of the church discussion of a concept called mystical marriage, where as you advance in the spiritual life and become closer and closer to God, eventually there is actually a nuptial experience where the soul experiences a marriage to God. In this transform union, or this mystical marriage of the soul to God, Saint Teresa of Avila describes that here it is like water descending from heaven into a river or a spring, where one is so mixed with the other that it cannot be discovered which is the river water and which is the rain water. And in this state in mystical marriage, the soul is so transformed in God that it comes to participate in God and to be deified through participation. Now, as we know, with these sacraments of the church, sacraments are the visible sign of a mystical or spiritual reality. And so the church has instituted marriage as a physical sign of a mystical reality. And so what is that reality? That reality is that marriage is the physical representation of God's design for his relationship with the human soul. It's the physical representation of God's desire to be married to our souls. And what are some of the attributes of the marriage which God desires to have with our souls? He desires a union that's free, total, faithful, and fruitful, which is what we see in the theology of the body for the proper characteristics of a sacramental marriage. Our Lady is the number one example of what this mystical marriage would and should look like. That could be a strange idea to some, to realize that Our Lady was mystically married to the entire Trinity, which actually means she was mystically married to her own son, which seems maybe a little scandalizing to us who have this less than pure view of what marriage should be sometimes. But yeah, to just sit and ponder and meditate on Our Lady through all the mysteries of the Rosary and the state of her marriage to God and her soul, and how that affected her experience of Christ who came incarnate in her arms, and to have the spouse of her soul made flesh before her is something so incredible. As with every stage of prayer, there are certain phenomena that accompany that particular stage. And one of the really interesting phenomena that occurs in the state of union with God is something called mystical touches, where the soul actually tangibly perceives that God is touching it. And after all, it is the desire of all the saints to come face to face with God, to have that intimacy with God. And once you realize that you can start to have a foretaste of that on earth, there is a sense in which you start to crave these mystical touches and other phenomena where you feel like God is just revealing himself to your soul. As I travel on my spiritual path, something God has to keep reminding me of is the need for patience, and that virtue. Maybe it's one of my weak points of having to wait for God, but something that Jesus brought to my attention a few weeks ago in this sense of desiring that union with God was that my marriage is a representation of the marriage that I crave with him. And God, Jesus really has entered into our marriage through the sacrament. That's part of the beauty of getting married in the church, is Christ enters into your marriage. And he told me, your husband is my physical representative to you on earth. And so for all of those times that I feel impatient and I am waiting for God to reach out and touch me and that I can have that closer contact, he's reminding me that my husband is Christ to me. And every time my husband touches me, it is Christ touching me. Every time my husband loves me in any way, it is Christ loving me. And that is true of all spouses. There is a real mystical incarnation of Christ into your spouse. And to be able to see through the veil, to see that Christ is there loving you in your spouse. And so for as much as you long for God, God is already being made real to you right in front of you every single day. Now, directly following this explanation, it was explained to me that I should love my husband as Christ loved the Father on the cross, and to be able to recognize his incarnation in my spouse and to be able to treat him as such and receive love from him as such, as directly from God. If all marriages could have this recognition, you can only imagine the transformation in our families and in society that we would see. And so ultimately, this is where we've come to find that perfect Christic love in all of our relationships, is by recognizing that it is God's nature to incarnate, and he is incarnate in people all around us, and we have to be able to see through the veil to a degree. I know not everyone can see through the veil all the time, but to just know that Christ is mystically present in other people, in their relationships with us, and that we can actually touch God here in the world. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time.